Welcome back to my channel Famous and Fabulous. On a cold day in January 1952, a small group of people came together to say goodbye to a man who had made the whole world laugh. But inside the cemetery gates, there was no laughter. There was only quiet sadness for Jerome Howard, theman everyone knew as Curly. As his family cried, one guest showed up who didn't belong there. This person sent a silent shock through the crowd, because they represented all the pain that had led to this very day. The funeral was a sad event held at the home of Peace Cemetery in East Los Angeles. It was a Jewish service for Amon, who had become a comedy legend. He was 1/3 of the famous Three Stooges. His brothers Moe and Shemp and his comedy partner Larry Fine stood with heavy hearts. They were burying not just a co-star, but their brother, a man whose life had ended way too soon at the age of 48. For millions of fans, the man they were crying for was Curly, the human cartoon with the high-pitched voice and the nuke that could make anyone smile. He was the tough man child, who could take an eye poke or a slap to the head and come back with a woo-woo. But the people standing at his grave knew the truth. They were burying Jerome Lester Horwitz, a man whose final years were completely different from the joy he brought to others. His life had ended not with a laugh, but with several terrible strokes that left him paralyzed and unable to speak, stuck in hospitals and nursing homes. The sadness in the air was thick. Moe, the toe-as-nails leader of the Stooges, was now just a heartbroken older brother. Larry, his loyal friend, had lost a partner he called the greatest natural comedian he had ever known. They were surrounded by family and friends who had watched helplessly as Curly's bright light got dimmer and then went out completely. And in the middle of this deep sadness, one person stood among them. This person was not a friend. They were not a loved family member. To the few who knew the whole story, this guest was the living, breathing symbol of Curly's tragic downfall. Their arrival, his final resting place, was a quiet, shocking act that no one could have predicted. Who was this person? And why did their presence feel like a final mean joke at the expense of a man who'd given his life for comedy? To understand the tragedy of Curly's death, you have to understand the man who existed long before the world knew his name. He wasn't born Curly. He was born Jerome Lester Horwitz on October 22, 1903 in Brooklyn, New York. He was the youngest of 5 brothers, and because of that, his family gave him a nickname that would stick with him his whole life: Babe. Unlike his older brothers, Moe and Shemp, who were always getting into trouble, Babe was a quiet child. He wasn't a great student, but he was a fantastic athlete on the school's basketball team. He was also a talented ballroom dancer known for his smooth moves at local dance halls, where he would sometimes see the future movie star George Raft. He was a handsome young man, with a full head of thick, wavy brown hair and a stylish moustache. But his youth was marked by a moment of pain that would physically change him forever. When he was just 13 years old, he was cleaning a rifle when it accidentally went off, shooting a bullet into his left ankle. His brother Moe acted fast, rushing him to the hospital and saving his life. The wound, however, left his left leg noticeably thinner and gave him a permanent limp. Doctors wanted to do surgery to fix it, but Jerome was terrified of the operation and said no. For the rest of his life, he would walk with that limp. It was a secret pain he would later learn to hide from the world in a very clever way. When he became a star, he developed his famous over-the-top walk to make his limp look like just another part of his silly character. Jerome looked up to his older brothers and watched as Moe and Shemp found success in vaudeville as part of a comedy act with a man named Ted Healy. Jerome would hang around backstage, dreaming of joining them. His chance finally came in 1932 when Shemp decided to leave the group to try a solo career. Moe immediately suggested that his kid brother Babe could take Shemp's place. But when Jerome showed up to audition, Ted Healy took one look at the handsome young man with the nice hair and mustache and said, no. Healy felt he looked too good to be a stooge. What happened next was a decision that would bring Jerome incredible fame, but would also plant the seeds of his future unhappiness. Determined to get the part, Jerome walked out of the room. He came back just minutes later, having shaved off his mustache and every last strand of his hair. In that moment, Jerome Babe Horwitz disappeared and Curly was born. But the price for that change was a deep insecurity that would haunt him for the rest of his days. He hated his shaved head, feeling it made him look like a little kid and unattractive to women. The very act that made him a star was also the source of a wound to his self-confidence that never truly healed. With Curly as the new third stooge, the group's popularity exploded. His childlike energy and amazing ad-lib skills made him an instant fan favorite. The Three Stooges signed with Columbia Pictures and began making the short films that would make them legends. But behind the laughter and the on-screen chaos, the life of a stooge was hard. Their schedule was brutal, a non-stop cycle of filming and touring that took a heavy toll, especially on Curly. During World War II, when they weren't filming, the Stooges would spend up to 7 months a year on the road performing for service members. The work was intense and exhausting. Curly had a strict rule from Mo: no drinking during work or on stage. But as soon as the day was done, Curly would head out to nightclubs, used food and partying as a way to deal with the huge stress and his own deep insecurities. He was a big spender, buying expensive things for himself and for the women he was always trying to impress. He was often almost broke, and Mo had to step in to manage his money and even help him with his taxes, trying to protect his younger brother from his own bad choices. His personal life was just as crazy. After a brief first marriage that was annulled, he married a woman named Elaine Ackerman in 1937. They had a daughter together, Marilyn. But the marriage didn't last. They divorced in 1940. And it was after this split that Curly's health began a noticeable decline. He started gaining a lot of weight and developed dangerously high blood pressure. By 1944, the strain was starting to show on screen. Fans could see that something was wrong. High's energy, once endless, was fading. His voice, once high and squeaky, became deeper and hoarse. His movements were slower, and he struggled to remember his lines. The energetic, lively Curly was becoming a shadow of his former self. In January 1945, things got so bad that he had to go to the hospital. The doctors gave him a scary diagnosis: extreme high blood pressure, a retinal hemorrhage, which is bleeding in the back of the eye, and obesity. His body was breaking down. Mo, seeing how sick his brother was, went to the head of Columbia Pictures, Harry Cohn, and begged him to give Curly some time off to rest and recover. But Cohn refused. The Three Stooges shorts were incredibly profitable, and the studio head would not stop production for any reason. Curly was forced to go back to work. The decision was a death sentence. The system that was making him a star was also killing him, and the people in charge chose profits over his life. Off-screen, Mo Howard was nothing like the character He played. He wasn't a bully. He was a protector. He watched over his brothers, especially his youngest, Babe. Seeing Curly's health fall apart after his stay in the hospital in 1945 left Mo deeply worried. He saw his brother drinking too much, spending too much, and living a lonely, chaotic life. Mo became convinced that the root of Curly's problems was loneliness following his divorce from Elaine. In his heart, Mo believed that if Curly could just find the right woman and settle down, his health would improve. He thought marriage would give Curly a reason to stop the endless partying and take care of himself. It was a decision made out of love and desperation. An older brother trying to save his younger sibling from self-destruction. This is sown of the great sad ironies of the Stooges' story. On camera, Mo was the one who gave all the physical punishment to Curly. But in real life, he was the one trying to shield him from pain. During a tour in late 1945, Mo decided to play matchmaker. He introduced Curly to a woman named Marion Buxbaum, who was a relative of a local theatre manager. Curly, who was known to be a pushover for women and really naive when it came to romance, was instantly smitten. He was a man who wanted affection and was easily taken advantage of by those who saw his fame and generosity as an opportunity. Mo saw this new relationship as a ray of hope. He pushed them together, hoping this woman would be the one to finally bring stability to his brother's life. He thought he was giving his brother a lifeline. But what Mo didn't know was that he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. His attempt to save Curly would not only fail, it would backfire in the most catastrophic way imaginable. The loving gesture from a worried brother was about to unleash a storm that would completely destroy what was left of Curly's fragile health. Curly's relationship with Marion Buxbaum moved at lightning speed. After knowing each other for just 2 weeks, they got married on October 17, 1945. For Curly, it must have felt like a fresh start, but the dream quickly turned into a nightmare. The marriage was, by all accounts, a disaster from the very beginning. It lasted only 3 terrible months filled with constant arguments and bitter accusations. On January 14, 1946, they separated and Curly sued for divorce. What followed was not a quiet parting of ways, but a messy and embarrassing public spectacle. The divorce became front-page news, with local papers covering every scandalous detail. The man who was loved by millions as a sweet, innocent character was now being dragged through the mud in public. The accusations that flew back and forth in the courtroom were brutal. Marion painted a picture of Curly as a monster. According to court records, she claimed he used filthy, vulgar, and vile language, kept 2 vicious dogs, has shouted at waiters in cafes, pushed, hit, and kicked me, put cigars out in the sink. Curly in turn told a story of being used and betrayed. He complained to the court. She refused to live with me. She wanted half of everything, called me bad names. He explained how in the 2 short weeks he'd known her before their marriage, he'd showered her with gifts, spending a fortune on her. He bought her a 3,750 mink coat, an 850 wristwatch, a 2,000 Tiffany bracelet, and gave her hundreds for clothes. The judge in the case saw right through Marion's story. He went so far as to call her a gold digger in open court, and even ordered her to leave Los Angeles County. But despite the judge's harsh words, the damage was done. In the final settlement, Marion Buxbaum walked away with half of everything Curly owned, including a new house he'd just bought for her. He was left financially devastated and emotionally broken. The stress of the public humiliation was huge. For a man who was already in a fragile state of health, this brutal experience was the final blow. His health, which had been slowly getting worse for over a year, began to fall apart at a terrifying speed. The timeline is impossible to ignore. The separation and the start of the ugly divorce battle happened in January 1946. Just 4 months later, in May, his body gave out completely. Marion Buxbaum didn't just take his money, she broke his spirit, and in doing so, she broke his health beyond repair. May 6, 1946 was the day the laughter stopped for good. The Three Stooges were on the set at Columbia Pictures, filming their 97th short, a film called Half-Wit's Holiday. Curly was in terrible shape. He was so weak, and his memory was so poor that the director Jules White had to give most of his lines to Larry or cut them completely. Mo had to stand beside him in scenes, quietly coaching him and helping him get through his lines. It was clear to everyone on set that he was a very sick man. The crew was setting up for the final scene of the day, a massive chaotic pie fight, the signature move of any great Stooges comedy. Curly, exhausted, went to sit down and wait in director Jules White's chair, just off camera. A few minutes later, the assistant director called out, telling the Stooges it was time to take their places for the scene. Mo and Larry walked onto the set, but Curly didn't move. Mo went to see what was wrong. He found his little brother slumped over in the chair. Mo later described the horrifying moment, saying Curly's head had dropped to his chest, his mouth west-wisted, and he was completely unable to speak. All he could do was cry. Curly had suffered a massive stroke right there on the set. There was no big announcement. The cast and crew weren't told what had happened. While Curly was being rushed to the hospital, Jules White quickly changed the script. The pie fight, the grand finale, went on without him. If you watch that final scene today, you'll see Mo and Larry slipping and sliding in the mess. But Curly is nowhere to be found. He is simply gone. The comedy machine kept running, but its most important part had just broken down forever. The stroke ended his career. He would never again perform as an official member of the Three Stooges. The man who had made the world roar with laughter was now trapped in a devastating silence. Now let's go back to that cold day at the cemetery in January 1952. We see Mo, Shemp and Larry standing by the grave, saying their final goodbyes to the brother and friend they had lost. We see his family and the few people who truly knew the gentle, insecure man behind the comedy. And then we see her, the one guest at Curly Howard's funeral that no one ever expected to see. It was Marion Buxbaum, the woman who had married him after knowing him for 2 weeks. The woman who had dragged his name through the mud in a scandalous public divorce. The woman who a judge had called a gold digger before she walked away with half of his fortune. The woman whose actions had pushed him over the edge, triggering the final catastrophic decline in his health that led directly to the stroke that ended his career and ultimately his life. After the divorce, she had basically vanished. But now here she was at the funeral of the man whose life she had helped to destroy. Imagine what Mo must have felt seeing her there. He was the one who had introduced them, hoping to save his brother. Seeing her face at Curly's grave must have been an almost unbearable reminder of his own tragic mistake. For everyone who knew the true story, her presence must have felt like a slap in the face. Why did she come? The historical record gives us no answer. Was it a final bold act to show that she had a right to Betha? Was she feeling a flicker of guilt for the damage she had caused? Or was it something colder? A way to make even this final tragic moment about her? We will never know what was in her heart that day. Her appearance at his funeral remains the last chilling mystery in the sad story of Curly Howard's final years. She was a ghost from the most painful chapter of his life, appearing one last time to stand over his grave. In his final years, when he was still able to communicate, Curly once sadly told a friend, "I guess I'll never be able to make the children laugh again." He was wrong about that. Generations of children and adults still roar with laughter at his genius. But the man himself, Jerome Horwitz, never found the simple happiness he gave to so many others. He spent his life searching for love and acceptance, but often found exploitation and heartbreak instead. The shocking appearance of that one unexpected guest at his funeral was a final silent reminder of the private pain he went through, a somber reminder of the unbelievably heavy price he paid to make the world laugh.